Assalamu alaikum, my dear students. This is again Dr. Muhammad Shafiq, lecturer, Department of Islamic and Pakistan Studies West. And the course I'm teaching you is Introduction to Logic, and the course code is PHI 101. Today is lecture number 15, and we are going to discuss what are the fallacies of relevance. So, before starting what are the fallacies of relevance, I'll just give you a brief recap about fallacy. What is fallacy? Sometimes an argument seems to be valid and sound, but in reality it is not so. It involves a violation of some rule of logic which is not apparent and which can be detected only on close examination. Such a piece of unsound reasoning is called fallacy. When the premise of an argument fails to support its conclusion, we call the argument a fallacious argument. So a fallacy is an argument which appears to be valid, but in fact it is not so, and it can mislead us. So, as we know, logic is the study of those methods and principles which distinguish between correct reasoning and incorrect reasoning. So we need to identify incorrect reasoning as well in order to be able to present our argument effectively and validly. Now, what are the fallacies of relevance? As it is evident from the name of these fallacies, and I've given you a brief idea in my previous lecture, there are four classifications of fallacies, but the first group of fallacies are very important and called fallacies of relevance. Why these are important? Because these are very frequently used in our daily lives. So we need to be aware of these fallacies. Fallacies of relevance are bald mistakes. That is to say, they are the product of the missing connection between the premise and conclusion. And since the connection is missing, the premises cannot establish the truth of conclusion drawn. But the premise may look relevant to the conclusion psychologically to the reader or hearer. Each fallacy of this kind has traditional and modern names, which will be discussed one by one. So the fallacies of relevance, in simple words, are those fallacies are those arguments rather, where we cannot see or we cannot find any relevance between premise and conclusion, or between the premises themselves. So there's a missing connection or missing link between the premise and conclusion, or in between the premises. But apparently these arguments look quite valid, because such fallacies or such arguments are quite tricky. So now we are going to move on and see what are these 5 fallacies of relevance one by one. So the first one is called appeal to emotion, or argument ad populum. A very common fallacy and quite frequently used, especially in our marketing, selling the products, as well as by our politicians and some religious people. So these are, as it is evident from the name of this fallacy, which is called appeal to emotion. These are the fallacies which are basically the product of emotions. When an argument is based upon emotions rather than facts, it is called argument ad populum or appeal to emotion. Like every demagogue and propagandist rely upon such kind of appeal to emotion to fulfill their purposes. Like for example, you might have seen on your television that there are certain products, for example, they assign or they, for example, in advertising companies or on the television, we see that they claim some soft drinks, for example, cola, while hiring a very popular celebrity of a sports or from media, from movies or television, who walks in front of the screen while having a sip of that drink and claiming to be very happy and refreshed by this kind of drink. Now, why do they hire such kind of celebrities, and why do they pay them so huge amounts? Because it's not something which cannot be performed by anyone, but because they want to use the emotions of the people in order to sell their product as much as they can. They would hire a sports personality or from entertainment industry, or maybe if you're watching an ad of a shampoo, for example, a beautiful girl would walk in and having a nice long shiny hair would claim to be using such and such shampoo. Why? Because they want to attract people, they want to attract the viewers, and once they attract them, they can play with their emotions. So if, for example, if Afridi comes and says, and having a sip of Pepsi, says that, or claims that when he drinks Pepsi, he hits the shots, and people just following that, they'll just go crazy and buy Pepsi. This is a prime example of appeal to emotion. Why? Because people are attracted toward these celebrities, and then they are so emotional that they don't even think about the ingredients of that drink, that it has got so much sugar in it that if someone drinks it regularly, he would face so many medical complications, so many diseases, let alone being a fit sportsman like Afridi. So it's just like, using this. There is no connection between premise and conclusion. Premise says that Afridi drinks Pepsi. Conclusion says that is why he hits sixes. Now, drinking Pepsi does not logically entail that you can hit sixes. Similarly, as someone has said that patriotism is the last refuge of scoundrel. I mean, when obviously you're not that old, neither me, but if you hear the stories on the television about this the war between Pakistan and India in 1965, you would have heard that there was a singer, legend singer called Noor Jahan, who used to sing songs for the people that मेरे नगमे तुम्हारे लिए हैं, and people used to carry bombs with them and going underneath of those tanks of the enemy and blowing them up. What was it? It was just playing with the emotions. I'm not saying that it was something negative, but if you think for a second, if someone has lost his life, so what does this country mean to him, and what does this, all geographical boundaries mean to him? Nothing. Once he's died, he's died. So we need to be very careful when examining certain arguments that this kind of appeal to emotion fallacy is quite frequently used also by the politicians when they come and play with the emotions of the people in order to take votes from them, and after winning the election you won't see them for 5 years. So they play with the emotions. It is very easy to hijack emotions of the people and then use them, as religious demagogue has done so many times, in the name of uh, in the name of protecting their religious beliefs, such as demonstrations for the against Tawheen Risalat. But what happens? People go out and they just uh, damage their own properties rather than going and taking in hand, stopping those people who are committing this blasphemy uh, by force, rather than they just go and damage their own property. So this kind of fallacy is quite normal and quite often used in our daily life. The second one, or argument as misericordium. Misericordium. When an argument relies upon generosity or altruism and seeking mercy, it is called fallacy of appeal to pity. For example, beggars using this kind of argument to gain sympathies and fulfill their financial goals. Now, if you look closely, pity is also a kind of emotion, obviously, but this fallacy specifically targets the emotion of pity. Normally, we have seen so many times in our daily lives that once someone does not have an answer to an argument, he always hangs on to the pity, and he uses this card. I mean, I remember once I was driving in Peshawar in a very crowded place, and I was driving quite carefully because my car, obviously I loved my car, it was quite expensive. So I was just passing by, and one of that Chinchi drivers who happened to be racing on the road, a very crowded road, just hit my car. And when I stopped him and I grabbed him, that who's going to pay for the damages, and when he realized that he cannot escape, he tried to use this pity card. He said that he's a very poor guy and he cannot afford anything, and he hasn't got any money, and his children are dying of hunger, and he has got sick parents at home, blah blah blah, all sorts of things. And then people started also favoring him and requesting me to just let him go. But I knew for the fact that it is just a fallacy, appeal to pity. I mean, there is no connection between the premise and conclusion. The premise, while driving your chinchi recklessly, uh, and the conclusion says he is a poor man. So poverty doesn't have to do anything with driving recklessly and hitting someone on the road. Similarly, there is an incident written in the book that once a person who was on trial in a court in United States, when he was charged with the murder, the judge asked him that what is uh, when he was finally charged for the murder, he was asked by the judge if he had any last wish. So the person replied that he he basically he wants the judge to have some mercy upon him uh, because he's an orphan, and as it happened, the murder he was charged for was that of his own father. So he was trying to use the same card for, to have mercy. This is very funny. So normally when people are stuck, when they don't have a reply or answer to an argument, they normally use this pity, and it is quite common in our society. So this is the second kind of fallacy of relevance, called the appeal to force or argument ad baculum. This is a typical fallacy where normally when we run out of arguments, we start using our force. When an argument is based upon use of force rather than reason, it's called fallacy of appeal to force. Religious persecutions and national interests are prime example of such fallacy. I mean, obviously, you might have seen on the media so many times that if someone asks a question from any authority in the country, they try to shut him up by saying that it is against national interest to talk about these things, and you will be prosecuted in certain cases. Also, religious persecutions. I mean, they normally, when you try to question their certain beliefs they hold, if you try to question them, you will be charged for blasphemies and all sorts of things, and then nobody would even inquire whether it was true or false, and you will be persecuted in the name of religion. And we have seen so many cases in our society. The simple example would be like if you're sitting home and watching telly or doing something, and one of your younger sibling walks into the room and comes to you and asks a question from you, which of that kind of question you don't have any answer, or you don't even know the answer. You just try to shut him up by saying that just go away and don't disturb me, instead of answering logically to his question. So it is also very common, especially in our society, where people normally believe in might is right, because normally poor people, weaker people are charged with the so many offenses which are very minor in nature, while the stronger would even get away with murders and stuff. And we have seen certain news items in our television on daily basis and newspapers that there are so many criminals on the run, and they are just enjoying their freedom and liberty because they are stronger than the system, legal system. So this is the appeal to force. Again, a missing link between premise and conclusion. In premise, obviously you cannot answer logically the question of your sibling, so you try to use the force and try to shut him up by force, just telling him to get out of the room and do not disturb him. So this is the third kind of fallacy of relevance, called argument against person or argument ad hominem. Again, it's very common in our society. When an argument is based upon inflicting personal damages rather than reason, when it tries to target the opponent rather than responding to the argument rationally, it is called fallacy of argument against person. Personal abuse during an argument is prime example of such fallacy. Or normally, when you ask someone that, it's very common in our society when you ask someone that why you are not studying, why you are not working hard for your studies, why you are just wasting your time. The response you will get would not be that this is the reason why I'm not studying, but it would be that, oh yes, as if you yourself was a great intellectual or something like that. Or if you ask someone why you're not going for prayers, they would say, yes, we know you're a Haji Sahib. So all these kinds of arguments which attack the personality of someone who asks questions, that basically is a fallacy called argument against person. Just a few days ago, I was just having a conversation, rather a debate with some of my friends upon political situation, and when they just got clueless and they couldn't answer my argument logically, they started attacking me by my qualification that you are not qualified in political science, rather you are qualified in philosophy, so you don't have any right to, comment upon certain political scenarios. So all these kind of examples we can see around us throughout the day. These are called argument against person because there is no link between a premise and conclusion. Premise would say that why you're not working hard, and conclusion says that yes, I know you are an intellectual. So there is no link between the person who you asking from that why you are not working hard and you being an intellectual. There is no logical connection between it. So that is why the premise and conclusion both are irrelevant. Hence it is called fallacy of relevance and argument against person. Last but not the least, that is obviously called irrelevant conclusion, or some people call it fallacy of missing the point, and its traditional name is ignoratio elenchi. When an argument misses the point and draws a totally different conclusion than the rational one, it is based upon a confusion in reasoning which may or may not be realized by author himself, when premises say something else while the conclusion drawn is totally irrelevant. For example, if I tell you, for example, if I tell my students, or normally do, that if you work hard, you will pass the exam, and if you work hard, you will be successful in your life. But one of the students may come to me and say that, complain that I've been working really hard, but still I failed my exam. And if I ask how, they might say that I've been working hard, I've been running in the playground of the university like suppose 10 circles a day, and I've been going up and down to the hill and wandering around different departments. That is really tough job, especially in this spring semester in this scorching heat, but still I failed the exam. Now, this is totally irrelevant conclusion, because by working hard we mean basically to study, to read the books, and to clear your concepts of different topics of your course, rather than running around. That's obviously that is working hard, but that is in a different context. That could be working hard for your being a good sportsman, but it is useless in your studies. Or we may take the example of someone. Suppose I just come back from the uni and just sitting home. My wife brings me dinner and I'm quite hungry. When I start eating it, I just realize that it is too salty for me. And when I complain to my wife, she would say that, oh, I have worked so hard, but you just, you don't like the food I cook. I worked so hard because I went to the market, I bought this stuff, and I have been in the kitchen all day in this scorching heat, and now you are saying that the food is tasteless. Now there is no doubt she has worked hard to cook the food, but that does not necessarily mean that the food would taste good, because the taste of food is entirely a different thing than being in the kitchen all day in scorching heat. So again, there is missing link between the premise and conclusion. So such kind of fallacies are normally, they are called fallacy of irrelevant conclusion or missing the point. So these were the 5 fallacies of relevance. If you have any questions by any chance or any comments, please do let me know, so that we can discuss it before moving on to the next topic in our next lecture. And these are the recommended readings for you, and I've also given you some handouts in the class. So give it a read and let me know if you have any problem. Till then, thank you very much. Take care, and Allah Hafiz.